When perfection becomes a prison, Natalie, Pierce pressed her fingertips against her temples, trying to ease the headache that had been building for the past 6 hours. The conference room felt smaller with every passing minute, its walls lined with glass that reflected her exhaustion back at her. Outside those windows, the city sparkled with evening lights, a reminder that most people had already gone home to their families, their dinner plans, their lives. She had none of those things waiting for her. Just an empty apartment and a half-eaten salad from 3 days ago, still sitting in her refrigerator. The presentation on the table before her represented 3 weeks of work, 70-hour weeks, sacrificed weekends, and more coffee than any human should consume. Every slide was polished, every number verified, every recommendation backed by solid data and market research. It should have been enough. With any other boss, it would have been the man who demanded everything. The door opened without warning. Julian Sterling entered the way he always did, with the kind of presence that made the air feel heavier. At 36, he had built Sterling Enterprises from a small logistics firm into a multi-million-dollar empire. He wore his success like armor, perfectly tailored charcoal suits, watches that cost more than her car, and an expression that never quite revealed what he was thinking. Natalie straightened in her chair, squaring her shoulders. "The Henderson proposal," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. His voice was smooth, controlled, the kind of voice that made demands sound like reasonable requests. "Where are the competitor analysis charts?" Her stomach dropped. "Your assistant said you wanted focus on market positioning and revenue projections." The competitor analysis was marked as optional in the brief. Julian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Optional means comprehensive preparation, not omission. If Henderson asks about our competitive advantages and you cannot provide detailed comparisons, we lose credibility. "I can have that ready by tomorrow morning," Natalie offered, keeping her voice steady despite the frustration building in her chest. "Tomorrow morning is too late. The meeting is at 8. He checked his watch with deliberate precision. "You have 4 hours. When enough is finally enough, something inside, Natalie snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet internal crack that had been forming for months. 4 hours, she repeated, her voice carefully neutral. To compile competitive data on 6 major firms, create visual representations, and integrate them seamlessly into a presentation that is already complete. Yes, after I have already worked 60 hours this week. Commitment is not measured in hours, Julian replied. It is measured in results. Natalie stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "Do you know what it is like to work for you?" His expression flickered with something, surprise perhaps, but it vanished quickly. "I expect excellence." "No," she countered, her carefully maintained professional facade finally crumbling. "You expect people to read your mind. You change requirements without communication. You move targets without warning. And when we fail to anticipate your unspoken expectations, you treat us like we are incompetent." The silence that followed felt dangerous. Julian took a step closer. "If you are unable to meet the standards of this position, this is not about standards." Natalie interrupted, her voice rising despite her best efforts. "This is about respect. I am not a machine. I am not an algorithm you can optimize. I am a person who has sacrificed relationships, sleep, and my own well-being to meet your impossible demands." The moment everything changed, he moved closer still, and she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle. His expression had shifted into something she could not quite read. Not anger, not dismissal, something more complicated. "You think I do not see you?" His voice had dropped lower, almost dangerous in its quietness. "I know you do not. Then you are wrong." Before Natalie could process what was happening, Julian closed the remaining distance between them. His hand lifted to her face, hesitant for just a fraction of a second, and then his lips were on hers. The kiss was not gentle. It was not sweet or tender or any of the things first kisses were supposed to be. It was urgent and complicated and completely inappropriate. For one breathless moment, her anger transformed into something else entirely. Something that made her heart race and her thoughts scatter. Then reality crashed back. Natalie shoved him away, hard enough that he stumbled back a step. "What is wrong with you?" Her voice shook with anger and shock and confusion. "You cannot you do not get to do that." Julian looked as stunned as she felt. His carefully maintained control had slipped, revealing something raw underneath. That should not have happened. No, it should not have. Natalie grabbed her bag from the chair, her hands trembling. "I am done. With this project. With this job. With you. Wait, no." She moved toward the door, needing distance, needing air, needing to be anywhere but in this room with this man who had just turned her entire world upside down. "Do not contact me. Do not call me. We are finished." The aftermath of impulse. She made it to the elevator before the full weight of what had just happened hit her. She had just walked away from the best job she had ever had, from the salary that had finally let her pay off her student loans, from the career trajectory that was supposed to secure her future. All because her millionaire boss had kissed her. And the worst part, the part that made her stomach twist with self-directed anger, was that for one terrible, wonderful moment, she had kissed him back. The elevator doors closed, and Natalie pressed her back against the wall, closing her eyes. Tomorrow she would deal with the consequences. Tomorrow, she would figure out her next steps. Tonight, she just needed to get home and try to make sense of what had just happened between them in that conference room, and why part of her already regretted walking away. When desperation looks like opportunity, Natalie spent the entire weekend in her apartment, alternating between anger and anxiety. She had drafted her resignation letter 4 times, each version more professional than the last, carefully avoiding any mention of what had actually happened. By Sunday evening, she had convinced herself that Monday would bring clarity, distance, and a clean break from Julian Sterling. Monday brought something else entirely. She arrived at Sterling Enterprises at 7:30, earlier than usual, hoping to clear her desk before the office filled with people and questions. The receptionist looked surprised to see her, but said nothing. Natalie took that as a small mercy. Her desk looked exactly as she had left it Friday afternoon, before everything had changed. There was something surreal about the normalcy of it all. The coffee mug she had forgotten to wash. The sticky notes reminding her of meetings that no longer mattered. The framed photo of her and her sister from last Christmas. She was placing files into a box when her phone buzzed. An internal message from Julian's assistant. "Mr. Sterling requests your presence in his office immediately." Natalie's jaw tightened. Of course he did. The proposal that changed everything. Julian's office occupied the entire top-floor corner, with panoramic views that most people would never experience in their lifetimes. He stood by the window when she entered, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city below. He had abandoned his suit jacket, and his white shirt was rolled to his forearms in a way that looked calculated to appear casual. "Close the door," he said without turning around. Natalie closed it, but remained near the exit, maintaining distance. "I am here to return my access card and sign whatever exit paperwork you need. I am not accepting your resignation." She blinked. That is not how resignations work. Julian finally turned to face her. He looked tired, she realized, with shadows under his eyes that had not been there before. What happened Friday night was inappropriate and unprofessional. "I crossed a line that should never have been crossed." "Yes, you did. But before you leave, I need you to hear something." He moved to his desk and retrieved a folder, identical to the presentation folders they used for clients. "My board of directors has been pressuring me for 8 months. They believe my lack of a stable personal life makes me a liability. Investors want someone they can trust with their money. And apparently, a single man approaching 40 raises questions about judgment and commitment." Natalie frowned. "What does that have to do with me? I was supposed to be engaged by now." The woman they had chosen, someone from an appropriate social circle, walked away last month. She said I was more interested in quarterly reports than building a relationship. He opened the folder. She was right. Again, what does this have to do with me? Julian met her eyes directly. "I need someone credible to act as my partner. Someone intelligent enough to handle questions from investors. Someone already integrated into my professional life. Someone who understands the stakes. The implications hit her like cold water. You cannot be serious. I am completely serious. The terms of a devil's bargain. Natalie laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. You kissed me without consent, and now you want me to pretend to be your girlfriend. Do you hear how insane that sounds? Fiancé, Julian corrected. And it would not be pretending. It would be a contracted arrangement with clear terms and boundaries. Absolutely not. Your current salary is $78,000, he continued, as if she had not spoken. This arrangement would guarantee you $150,000 for 6 months of appearances. Additionally, I would secure your position here regardless of how the arrangement ends. No retaliation, no sudden terminations, no mysterious budget cuts. Natalie shook her head slowly. You think you can buy your way out of what happened? No. I think I can offer you security in an industry where women are laid off twice as often as men during restructuring. His tone remained even. Factual? I checked your employment history. You have been let go from 3 positions in 5 years due to company downsizing. This would protect you. The words stung because they were true. Natalie had learned the hard way that talent meant nothing when executives needed to cut costs. She had watched less qualified men keep their positions while she packed boxes. What would this arrangement actually involve? She asked, hating herself for even asking. Reading the fine print, Julian slid the folder across his desk. Everything is outlined here. Public appearances at company functions and investor meetings. Occasional social events where my board members will be present. We would need to be seen together regularly enough to appear legitimate. Natalie opened the folder. The contract inside was thorough to the point of being clinical. Duration, 6 months with option to extend. Compensation, detailed down to expense allowances. Public behavior, guidelines for appropriate interaction. Private boundaries, strictly professional. No physical contact beyond what is necessary for appearances. You wrote a relationship contract, she said flatly. I wrote a business agreement that protects both of us. She flipped to the final page. And what happens when this ends? When you have satisfied your board and no longer need a convenient fiancé, we announce a mutual decision to end the engagement. You keep your compensation and your job. I face whatever consequences come from my board, but at least I will have bought time to prove my competence through results rather than relationship status. Natalie studied him carefully. Why me? You could hire an actress, someone trained for this. Because actresses talk to tabloids, you have spent 5 years proving your discretion. He paused. And because you are the only person who has ever called me out on my behavior and meant it. The decision that defied logic. Natalie looked down at the contract again, reading through the clauses with a more critical eye. There were protections built in, safeguards against exploitation, clear definitions of what was and was not required. It was, objectively, a generous offer for what amounted to playing a role, but it was still insane. I need to think about this, she said finally. You have until tomorrow morning. She stood, folder in hand. At the door, she paused without turning around. The kiss, does the contract address that? Page 7, Section 3. No physical contact of any kind without explicit verbal consent from both parties. What happened Friday will never happen again unless you want it to. Natalie nodded slowly. And if I say no to all of this, then I will accept your resignation with a recommendation letter that will get you hired anywhere in this city. His voice held no threat, no manipulation, just resignation. The choice is entirely yours. She left without another word. When logic surrenders to necessity that night, Natalie sat at her kitchen table with the contract spread before her. She had read it 6 times, looking for traps, for hidden clauses, for anything that might hurt her later. The terms were surprisingly fair, almost suspiciously so. She thought about her bank account with its dangerously low balance, about the student loans that would take another decade to pay off at her current salary, about the 3 times she had been laid off through no fault of her own, watching her career momentum die with each forced restart. She thought about Julian's face when she had pushed him away. that flash of genuine shock and regret. About the exhaustion in his eyes this morning. About the clinical precision of a man who had built an empire but could not navigate basic human connection. And she thought about the fact that 6 months of financial security might give her enough breathing room to figure out what she actually wanted from her career, from her life. At midnight, she picked up her phone and typed a message, "I will do it, but we renegotiate Section 12 regarding public displays of affection. I want explicit veto power." His response came 2 minutes later. "Agreed. My office, 8 a.m. We start immediately." Natalie set down her phone and stared at the contract one more time. She was about to become engaged to a millionaire who drove her crazy, who had kissed her without permission, who was offering her money to solve his image problem. It was the most irrational decision she had ever made, and somehow, she suspected it would change everything. When lies become too heavy to carry 3 months into the arrangement, Natalie had perfected the art of playing her role. She had learned to smile at Julian's side during investor dinners, to laugh at appropriate moments during board meetings, to wear the elegant dresses that mysteriously appeared in her size each week. She had learned which hand gestures looked natural, which conversational topics deflected personal questions, which expressions conveyed affection without promising intimacy. What she had not learned was how to stop her heart from racing when Julian's hand rested on her back during photographs, how to ignore the way his eyes lingered on her sometimes when he thought she was not looking, how to separate the performance from the increasingly complicated feelings developing underneath. The charity gala was supposed to be simple. Another appearance, another night of careful choreography, another checkmark on their contractual obligations. Natalie wore a deep emerald dress that made her feel both powerful and vulnerable. Julian arrived at her apartment to escort her, punctual as always, devastating in his tuxedo. "You look beautiful," he said, and something in his voice made it sound less like a compliment and more like a confession. "Thank you," she replied, keeping her tone neutral. "You clean up adequately." His smile was genuine, reaching his eyes in a way that happened more often now. High praise. The cracks begin to show. The gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum, with its soaring ceilings and priceless art providing the backdrop for the city's elite to display their wealth and influence. Natalie recognized faces from magazine covers, people who shaped markets and toppled governments with their decisions. She and Julian moved through the crowd with practiced ease. He introduced her to investors, to board members, to rival executives who assessed her with calculating eyes. She played her part flawlessly, offering intelligent conversation without overshadowing him, showing interest without desperation, embodying the exact kind of partner a successful man was expected to have. "You are a natural at this," whispered Patricia Chen, one of the senior board members, during a quiet moment. "Julian seems happier since you came into his life." Natalie smiled, the expression feeling more genuine than it should. "He makes it easy." The lie came smoothly now. That was the problem. She excused herself to the restroom, needing a moment away from the performance. The bathroom was mercifully empty, all marble and gold fixtures. Natalie stared at her reflection, barely recognizing the polished woman looking back. When had the pretending started feeling real? The woman from before, she returned to find Julian in conversation with someone new. A tall woman with platinum blonde hair styled in an immaculate chignon, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than Natalie's monthly rent. The woman's posture radiated confidence and something else, possession. Natalie's stomach tightened with an emotion she had no right to feel. "There you are," Julian said as she approached, his relief visible. "This is Victoria Ashford." "Victoria, this is Natalie Pierce, my fiancée." Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade. "How lovely to finally meet the woman who replaced me." The words hung in the air like a challenge. "Victoria and I were engaged 2 years ago," Julian explained, his voice carefully neutral. "Briefly, 6 months," Victoria corrected, "until I realized I was competing with spreadsheets for his attention." She turned her focus to Natalie. "Tell me, how do you manage it? Keeping his interest when quarterly reports are so much more fascinating." Natalie recognized the game immediately. This was a test, a power play disguised as curiosity. I find that respecting someone's passion is more effective than competing with it. How enlightened. Victoria sipped her champagne. I suppose that comes from a different perspective. You work for him, do you not? The implication was clear, and nearby conversations began to quiet. Julian's jaw tightened. Natalie is a senior strategist at Sterling Enterprises. Her position has nothing to do with our relationship, does it not? Victoria's eyes glittered with malice. I heard an interesting rumor recently, something about a contractual arrangement. Natalie's blood ran cold. When secrets become weapons, I do not know what you are talking about, Julian said. But his control was slipping. Victoria pulled out her phone, scrolling with deliberate slowness. A friend on your legal team mentioned something fascinating. A personal services agreement, they called it. 6 months duration, substantial compensation, very specific terms about public appearances. The space around them had gone completely silent now. Phones were emerging, pointed in their direction. Natalie could see board members turning to stare. This is inappropriate, Julian said firmly. Is it? Victoria's voice rose just enough to carry. Is it inappropriate to question whether your engagement is legitimate? Whether this woman beside you is your partner or your employee playing a role? Natalie felt the world tilting. This was the moment she had feared from the beginning, the inevitable unraveling of their carefully constructed fiction. The contract is real, Victoria continued, addressing the growing audience now. A business arrangement designed to satisfy the board's concerns about his personal life. She is being paid to pretend. Murmurs erupted around them. Cameras flashed. Natalie saw board members exchanging alarmed looks. Investors stepping back as if proximity might contaminate them with scandal. The choice that defined everything. Julian stepped forward, his expression transforming into something fierce. That is enough. Is it true? Patricia Chen's voice cut through the noise. Is this engagement fraudulent? The question hung in the air, demanding an answer that would determine everything. Natalie watched Julian struggle, saw the calculations running behind his eyes. She knew what he was thinking. Deny everything, claim Victoria was lying, protect the arrangement at all costs. It was the logical choice, the survival choice, but it was also the choice that would force Natalie to become a liar in front of everyone. Yes, Natalie said clearly, her voice steady despite the chaos inside her. The engagement began as a contractual arrangement. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Julian turned to her, shock written across his face. She continued, speaking to the room, but looking only at him. Julian offered me financial security in exchange for public appearances to satisfy his board's expectations. I agreed because I needed stability. The contract was clear, the terms were fair, and I entered it willingly. So you admit you have been deceiving us, another board member said coldly. No, Natalie replied. I admit that what started as an arrangement became more complicated. But I will not lie about where it began. She turned to Julian. And I will not let you lie either. His eyes searched hers, raw emotion breaking through his usual control. I am done, Natalie said, her voice softer now. Done pretending, done performing, done being someone's solution. She looked at the assembled crowd. I am sorry for the deception, but I am not sorry for protecting myself, the only way I knew how. She pulled the engagement ring from her finger, the weight of it suddenly unbearable, and placed it in Julian's hand. The contract ends tonight. Walking away from everything, the walk through the museum felt endless. People stared, phones followed, whispers trailed behind her like ghosts. Natalie kept her head high, her steps steady, refusing to run despite every instinct screaming at her to flee. Outside, the night air hit her face like a blessing. She walked 2 blocks before her legs started shaking. 3 blocks before the tears came, 4 blocks before she finally stopped, leaning against the building and letting herself feel the full weight of what had just happened. She had destroyed Julian's reputation. She had confirmed his board's worst fears. She had thrown away 6 months of financial security and professional stability, and somehow it felt like the most honest thing she had done in months. Her phone buzzed repeatedly, messages flooding in. She ignored them all, except one, from Julian. "We need to talk. Please." She typed back, "Not tonight. Maybe not ever." Then she turned off her phone and walked home through the city. Alone, but finally, devastatingly honest with herself. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Tonight, she just needed to survive the truth.